Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you. It's a sunny day over here in Brooklyn, and I'm really looking forward to some study of this week's Parsha. I have to say, I've already been in two places this week where people have been like, "Oh, the Parsha is Lech Lecha. We have to sing Debbie Friedman's Lech Lecha. Beautiful song. We're not going to sing it here, but if you haven't heard it, maybe I'll put it in the chat later. We're going to be focusing on a different piece of the of this week's Parsha. Okay. Julie, could I please have screen sharing? Yes, thank you. This is my Nimbus. It's really just a sunburst mirror, but it ends up having this saintly feeling, which is hilarious. Okay, let's see. Okay. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to show this in a different way. Okay, so I'm going to show a photo. I promise it has to do with Abraham, but it's not going to be obvious immediately. And I want you to look at the photo and just the best you can. It's supposed to be like not one answer. Please write in the chat, what is happening in this photo? What is this a photo of? I don't need you to list every single item in the photo, but what is this a photo of? This is a collective photo of, okay, someone wrote a hotel bathroom, a clean bathroom, someone's bathroom sink. So those of you who wrote hotel bathroom, what makes you think it's actually a hotel bathroom and not a person's just very, very clean home bathroom? All right, looks like a spa. There's rolled towels. Maybe it's like a guest room. Someone has an escape plan, right? There's these dispensers. Maybe someone's saying it's, there's the wall hair dryer. Yeah, these weird hand wash dispensers. All right, and so it's a couple things at once. So I'm gonna give it away. It is a hotel bathroom. There's the attached hair dryer. There's the soap dispensers, and then this whole row, this whole shelf here, is probably things that weren't in the hotel bathroom, right? So the hair dryer was there when the person got there. The hand wash was there, but there's this whole entire shelf of items, and probably we're going to say that some of these items were not there when the person staying in this hotel room got there, that they, opened. Yeah, it is kind of weird that there's no reflection of a person. It's just a room, right? And I like Christina wrote, we are short timers here with a collection of our stuff. This person is traveling. They have a mini toothpaste. They have even a mini brush here. They have this little pouch, which maybe has some other toiletries in it. It's temporary. All right. Simcha says, I make a metaphor of it. Okay, so these are like grooming. So these are like little things that the person needs. So the paper towels are so high up. Why are they so high up? Okay, amazing. All right, thanks everyone for jumping in on that. So what's happening here? So the hotel in this place is temporary. By definition, a hotel is temporary. And this person, when they got to the hotel room, they could have just, and we could also like maybe even reflect on ourselves. Like there's kind of different people, the people that get to the hotel room and then they unpack literally everything and put their suitcase in the closet. And then some of us might be the kind of person that's like, no, this is temporary. If I need something, I'll pull it out of my suitcase. And I was thinking about this both because I had a trip last week and also because this idea of moving around and dedicating space, and how for some people And again, some of us have this as a habit, and some of us maybe could try it as a habit, as a new habit, of when we get to a new space, especially when it's temporary, dedicating a special area with our personal items, or with some items that maybe even are there. We might, even going back to this photo, I love how this person, they used the glasses, right? These glasses that were like probably water glasses to like set up their little toiletries. I just love that. And, they obviously took these things out of the bag, these like travel sizes, etc. And so they're like using the space, dedicating the space, organizing the space. And I'm imagining this person feels more comfortable and more settled, even though it's a temporary place. And we just got a message in the chat from Isaac who said, I make a dedicated bookshelf with my Shabbat candles every time I move around. I love that. That was actually going to be my next question. What are some other things, please type in the chat, what are some other things that you do? It could be Jewish or just to help you and yourself settle. What are some things you do when you move around to dedicate the space? So we already have making a little shelf with Shabbat candles. And yeah, what are some other things? Even Jay wrote, even on vacation, my wife's stuff goes on the right and mine goes on the left. Now that's a ritual right there. Bringing our Havdalah sets. All right, I like this. There's another comment that says, I don't try to make myself at home. I cherish the difference between home and my destination. Lisa says, I bring a mini essential oil diffuser. So there's some scent happening here. And getting a snack, deciding where my keys and my glasses go, put my tech stuff in one place. All right, Jane brings her own pillow. Great. Even at home, setting up space for rest renewal. So yeah, so it's Friday. So some of us might have something really specific we do, even in our home. Again, not necessarily moving around, but setting up space. I think about when I'm about to have company and I'm making sure there's enough coasters on the coffee table, or I'm dusting off an area that kind of looks clean, but when you get really close, has a little bit dust on it. All right, deciding which side of bed to sleep on. I love that. We could, even before not when you go to sleep. We're talking about when you arrive, you're going to decide. All right. Thanks everyone for all of these thoughts. We're going to be looking at, in this parsha, the concept of altars. And there's a number of altars in this parsha. And usually when we think of Abraham and altars, we think of the sacrifice of Isaac, which is later in the Torah. It is not in this week's parsha. We think of that story, but there are actually multiple altars in this week's parsha. And I want us to look at those altars and see what the purpose of them is. And I hope that it's going to help us think about what are some ways that we kind of like do what Abraham does, or in this case, he's still Abram, and how we might take some cues for in our life for when we're moving around. All right, so we have a source sheet that I'm going to put in the chat. But I'm also going to be sharing my screen. And here we go. By the way, this was all from an article called How to Stay Organized in a Hotel Room. All right, here we go. So going to the top of our sheet. So I have a definition here from one of my favorite teachers, Rabbi Jill Hammer. She says, an altar is a table of stones, but is also a way of saying, here is a meeting place between God and the world. And in the case of this parsha, the word that we keep seeing for altar is mizbeach, and we're going to look at the places where we see mizbeach and what each of these altars is independently, and then also what each of them has to do with each other. So what is this altar that Abram is creating? Before we go, I do want to hear anyone who wants to type in the chat, what do you think about this definition of altar? An altar is a table of stones, but is also a way of saying, here is a meeting place between God and the world. I'm really curious if a few folks want to share. Does that resonate with you? We have Heidi wrote, intention creates sacred space. Intentional. Hineni. Profound. Great. Okay, so it is resonating with people. Yeah, it really resonated with me. Somewhat Simcha wrote, I build altars often. It's a way of changing my energy. God wants to dwell with us. Table of stones sounds temporary. All right, amazing. So we'll talk a little bit more about stones and also what these altars might have looked like. Diana's talking about korban, keruv, karov. When we have an altar, it's usually because there's some sort of animal sacrifice in the Torah and drawing close, and that has to do with drawing close to God. Marking space and time. Okay, great. Yeah, I really love this definition as well. And I love the parallel between the sacred and the mundane. On the one hand, it's just some stones. It's a pile of stones. There could be a pile of stones on the side of the road, and there could be a pile of stones that's an altar, and it has to do with the intention that you bring to it. All right, so this is the word that we're going to see over and over again, mizbeach, altar. And this is just an example of a map that I found from BibleMapper.com. And just to give you an idea of, in our story, in this week's Parsha, Abraham has significant distances that he's traveling from Haran all the way to Egypt and back to Hebron. He ends in Hebron in this week's Torah portion. And I want to just say it's very significant. Even this path that Abraham took, is not something that most people we know have traveled, not something that you could even take a train on in modern times. Is a very, very, very long distance. All right, I'm just going to peek at the chat. So some really, really beautiful stuff. If you want to peek at the chat, Carolina wrote, I think that everywhere is a place where God meets the world. An altar is a physical reminder to pause and realize it. Stones may be temporary, but it can be a sacred space for our interaction and relationship with God. Just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. All right, so this is our first altar, and it's in a place that's called Moreh. We don't totally know if we go back to here where it says Shechem, that's where we're imagining that this altar is. And then there's this place called the Terebinth of Moreh. Terebinth is a type of tree, and it's this place called the Tree of Instruction. And this altar is what we sometimes, well, actually, I'll read the verse and then I'll comment on it. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the Terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanites were then in the land. Hashem appeared to Abram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there to Hashem who had appeared to him. So here we do have the word mizbeach, and another key word here is when it says Hanireh Alav, who had appeared to him. This is what we call theophany. So God has revealed God's self to Abram, and the altar is in reaction to the revelation, and also in this case in reaction to the gift of the land promise. We hear this both in Rashi and Ramban, that the receiving that this altar is an altar of a thanksgiving altar. Here's Rashi. He built the altar in thanksgiving for the good tidings that he would have children, and for the good tidings that they would possess the land of Israel. So he's building this altar in thanksgiving to God, and it's reaction to theophany. Oh, God spoke to me here. I'm going to go build an altar to mark this time. I'm going to now mark sacred space in reaction to sacred time. This theophany, this God speaking, revealing himself to Abram. And then we also have Ramban, where he says, the sense of expression, and there he built an altar to the Eternal who appeared unto him, is that he gave praise to the glorious name and offered to him a sacrifice of thanksgiving for his having appeared to him. Again, we're assuming that he didn't just put a bunch of rocks together and say, you're an altar, but he put a bunch of rocks together, put wood on it, put an animal on it, burn the animal, etc. Until now, God had not appeared to him, neither in a mar'eh or a machzeh. Those are just different words for meaning appearing. Rather, the command, get thee out of thy country, was said to him in a nocturnal dream or through Ruach HaKodesh. So this comment is saying that this is actually the first time that God appeared to Abraham, that the other times that Abraham received messages from God was in a dream. It is possible that the expression who appeared to him alludes to the mystery of the sacrifice. The one enlightened in the mysteries of the Torah will understand. V'hamaskil yavin. All right, so here we have this altar of thanksgiving. That's altar one. I'm just going to peek at the chat and see if there are additional questions. All right. We have, okay, if the location of the altar is moved, are the stones moved to the new location, or new stones gathered for the new spot? Are these special objects? I love that question, Stuart. We're gonna, what's interesting when you study biblical archaeology is that the type of altars that you find that we're able to say, oh, this is an ancient altar, are the ones of hewn stone. They're the ones where you can, someone has cut them into a certain shape. So we don't totally know the answer to this question, but my short answer is new stones are gathered in each location. And a little bit later in the class, we'll look at a couple of pictures of what it might have looked like. Terebinth trees is a very important place to meet God. So we could also, if we were to be reading the story a little more closely, we could even just see the fact that there's a terebinth tree, meaning, oh, maybe God's going to speak to someone. And yeah, this issue that Tanya wrote about cutting stones is very, very complicated question. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles and archaeologists have tried to address this question because we have some very clear sections of the Torah that say that you can't make an altar of unhewn stones, and then archaeologists have found Bronze Age hewn stones. So there's a lot of different theories on this. We're going to address it in the second half of the class briefly. So someone asked, does altar mean monument? Does altar mean monument? And I think there's another word, matzeva, which is used, I think, more commonly to mean monument. So meaning like, something happened here, put a stone. Similar to what we currently refer to like a graveside stone. So in this case, I'm gonna say that because it's saying mizbeach, we're assuming it's not just a pile of stones to just represent a location, but it's specifically an altar that was used for a sacrifice, and that if it meant a matzeva, a standing stone, it would have said a different word. Okay, I'm just scrolling down to see if there's a few others. So just to clarify, did Abram see a vision in a dream, or did the presence of God appear to him? Great question. Essentially what Ramban is saying here is that in the current Parsha, presence of God appeared, and previously in the Parsha, where it said hey, Abram, go out, Lech Lecha, that was a dream. Again, that's just one interpretation. And I also just want to briefly address, someone wrote, using an altar as a pagan practice. So there are a bunch of reasons why in modern times animal sacrifice, building altars for animal sacrifice for modern Jews is not part of our religion. And but in the time of Abraham, in this ancient time, this is, and before we had a Mishkan, before we had a temple for animal sacrifice, this was extremely common. Okay, last question in the chat, then we're going to keep going. Zevach, Mizbeach, yes, those are the same root. We also have Zevicha in Arabic, if you want to, the same word that we use as for shchita, for kosher slaughter. Zevicha in Arabic is like the halal type of kosher. It's the exact same word. Again, it usually has to do with animal slaughter, but yes, it is parallel to the word zebach. All right, let's jump to the next altar, pun intended. Let's walk all the way there. So one thing that I want people to notice is not just that Abraham's going to a new spot, but that he is, this is literally the next verse. So we just read 12:7. We just read Genesis 12:6-7. So he's at Shechem. We're looking at Shechem here. And those of us who've read the whole Parsha, we know that he's going to end up in Egypt. So he's walking south. But not only is he walking south, but he's actually walking uphill. Genesis 12:18. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and with Ai on the east. And he built an altar there to Hashem and invoked Hashem by name. So this is a different type of altar. Okay, notice how it's not the first place where, whoa, God spoke to me, now I'm going to build an altar of thanksgiving. This is a different altar. It says, he vayiven sham mizbeach, he built an altar there, LaShem, to God, vayikra b'shem Hashem. So he built the altar and then invoked God by name. So again, this here, I think this is, and again, I'm making this parallel between Abram and our lives. So there's like, whoa, I got to the hotel and it's so beautiful and I'm just, whoa, everything's amazing. I'm so grateful. I set up all my stuff. I feel a certain way. Or I could see this other angle where I'm like, wow, I'm in this weird place. It smells kind of weird. The layout of the room is not what I wanted. The lighting's off. Oh, I know. I'll set up my essential oil diffuser, and I'll move the bed a little bit, and I'll take out all my stuff. And building the altar, setting up the space, is the thing that helps me feel grounded. Simcha's wrote in the chat, to alter is to cleanse the space. God is in the details. And again, this goes back to something someone said earlier, which I really love, which it's not like, oh, we need an altar because God's here, but God's not over here. God is everywhere, but it's about the intention. We're going to skip this Rashi. You can read it later if you want. All right. The part of the Parsha we're not going to read. It's very disturbing. It's still worth reading. I'm going to hear it in synagogue tomorrow. After the episode of travel is that Abram and Sarai go to Egypt. They have an interaction with Pharaoh. Very disturbing. They have to go there because of a famine. And we're going to skip over that part and jump to the part where they're coming back from Egypt. So after they come back from Egypt, we see Abram returning to this same area. He revisits the same altar and invokes God. I like to think of it as Abram making a quick update to God at the rest stop payphone. And obviously this is a joke. I was really angry, by the way. My Google Docs autocorrect told me that payphone was not spelled correctly. Look at this. It says payphone is 2 words. Anyways, remember payphones? So, perhaps what Abram needs here is to know that, he doesn't need an altar to talk to God. He should have a cell phone. He can talk to God anywhere. But you know what? In those times, this is how people talk to God. They focus their intention, perhaps sacrifice an animal, and I just love this idea that whereas this first altar in the terebinths of Moreh, that was a very holy place. A really significant thing happened. But it's this altar between Bethel and Ai that Abram invoked God, and he goes back and visits that same spot, and Vayikra Sham Avram b'Shem Hashem, and then invokes Hashem's name. I'm just going to peek at the chat. All right. So Joe makes a good point here. The neighboring people could use the altars, and altars could be used while avoiding idolatry if used differently without a tool. So it definitely is the case that people would gather stones, make a little altar, sacrifice, walk away, and that someone else might see that and say, oh, cool, someone already gathered these stones and used that for an altar. And that is definitely an area where it could be problematic, living in a part of the world where there's people of different religions and sacrificing to different gods along the way. Great question there about Abraham and Sarah and halacha that we're not going to get into today, but I like the question. Someone wrote, does it demand a sacrifice of some sort, and is there mitzvah about building altars? So we're not going to focus too much on what the mitzvah would have been anachronistically. Did Abraham or did Abram know the whole Torah? There are definitely opinions that go that direction, and I like just hearing people's imagination around this. Let's get to Hebron. I already heard at least one person in the chat who loves going to Hebron and feels connected to it. One of the holy cities, and place where we know, because we're reading this in the future, that's where Abram is buried. But he doesn't know that at this point, unless he does. And here we go. Altar 3, Hebron or Hebron. Genesis 13:18. And Abram moved his tent and came to dwell at the terebinths of Mamre, which are Hebron, and he built an altar there to Hashem. So interestingly, again, we have the terebinths that we had before. These are Elonei Mamre, whereas if we go back to our first altar up here, the trees that we met was Elon Moreh, not exactly the same, but if we look back at our map, it says that those were in Shechem and that now we're in Hebron or Hebron right there. So, and I really want to draw your attention to these words. Before we kept having this word vayiven, that he was building an altar. And here we do have vayiven, but we also have this beautiful word vaye'ehal. If you know the word ohel for tent, then this is, he moved his tent. So he's not just going somewhere and, again, getting on a payphone and being like, okay, God, I'm here now. But he's actually vayeshev, he's settling. So here he's dedicating his new home. He's saying, this is where I'm going to live. This is my new home. And so that's the purpose of this altar. And okay, beautiful. All right. So and I think it's very significant that the text tells us about this altar in Genesis 13, because the next time we see Abram, or actually Abraham, build an altar, is in Genesis 22. So we don't see the Mizbeach again until the sacrifice of Isaac, until that story, which is, you can see right now we're in Genesis 13, that's all the way in Genesis 22. So to me, that's very significant. If we think of, again, going back to our map for a moment, he was all the way in Haran, then he was in Shechem, then he was in Egypt, then he was in Ai, and then he was in Egypt, and then he came back to Hebron, and this is where he ended up. In terms of dedicating his home. Just take a moment and so some really beautiful comments in the chat. Someone said, is an ark an altar? Simcha said, I hear connection to self, to earth, creating home for God to rest in us, and then we can build the Moreh altar. Yeah, I really appreciate everyone in the chat sharing so honestly. My sense is that some people here feel really connected to this idea of altar and home altar, and the parallels between Abraham building altars and our dedicating space in our homes. And a couple of people at least are a little uncomfortable with it, and I just want to honor that. I'm really trying to imagine. I really like the practice of imagining myself as the characters in the Torah. That helps me connect to them. And so in no way am I suggesting, hey, we should all go find a pile of rocks and sacrifice an animal. But I do think that the instinct, again, this human instinct, it's one thing if Hashem says to Abram, go sacrifice to me, which is something that is very clear later in the Torah. But it's like this instinct of like, whoa, something just happened. Gotta get a pile of rocks. Whoa, this is my new home. Gotta get a pile of rocks. And I just love imagining, again, it's one thing to do something because it's the law or because a voice of God tells you, but this instinct to say, oh, I want to gather these rocks. I want to dedicate this place. Joe says, Alone Moreh is a stunningly beautiful place. Okay. All right. We're going to see a couple of pictures now. So what does a Mizbeach look like? Again, it could just be a pile of rocks. Let me tell you, there are so many Christian websites that want to tell you what this pile of rocks look like, and it made me think we need some more Jewish artists making art of the begin. We kind of jump from Noah all the way to Egypt, and we don't have enough good Abraham art. There's lots of Abraham art, the sacrifice of Isaac, not enough for the altar building. So the most common altar that archaeologists have found in most biblical archaeology, they talk about the four-horned altar. This is obviously not a pile of rocks. This is hewn stone. Someone cut this into this shape. This particular one was found in Beersheba and was actually in pieces and was pieced back together. There's a lot of theories of, that it was purposely smashed because of certain times in history. But it's really amazing that archaeologists have found this because there's so many examples in the Torah of what a horned altar is. Make horns in Exodus later, make horns on the four corners. Ezekiel, the height of the altar shall be 4 cubits with 4 horns projecting upward from the hearth, 4 cubits. But again, this is later. This is later than Abram. There's some links here if you want to learn more about it. This one is another 4-horned altar that, the shape of it is like someone kind of carved it, but you could see maybe this was something that was like a side of the road altar, or someone just chiseled it a little bit. All right, we have some really beautiful comments in the chat. Jen wrote, we can alter our space with an altar. Beautiful. Thank you for writing that. That's amazing. Joanne wrote, I love Abram's progression, hearing God, seeing God, naming God. Yeah, it's like this really beautiful journey where if we look at the whole Parsha, it sounds kind of exhausting, but knowing that it lands with home and with dedicating that space feels really grounding to me. For me, when I look at the Torah portion, I don't just say, oh, this is an academic exercise. This is this week's Torah portion. I wonder what the literature means, because studying literature is interesting. But I really like to think of, and thanks for all my woo-woos here. I've no need to restrict the woo-woo-ness. I really like to think of the Parsha as it's coming this week, because there's something in the Parsha that I need to hear this week. There's something that the Parsha is giving, not just when I hear it on Saturday morning, but the whole week. There's some message in the Parsha that I need to take into my life. And when I study the Parsha, there might be a part of it that's very intellectual. Some of you have studied with me before know I love grammar, and I love archaeology, and I love science. But there's also this part where it's like, what is the Parsha trying to tell me to take into my life? And that's what I'm trying to do here. Jay wrote, an analogy to different stages in life's journey. Are these altars ways to mark important places and stages? As Abram's life was more permanent in Hebron, perhaps his altar there was a more permanent one. Exactly. Lori asked, great question. Where is Sarai? Does she help Abram? Is she slaughtering the animals? Is she carrying stones? What's she up to? I love that question. We might have to ask the Midrash on that one. We only have a couple more minutes. I want us to take a moment, and if the hotel photo didn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. And because it's Friday, I want us to think about one thing that we can alter. I'm using the pun intended, that we can alter in our home as we move into the weekend. Maybe for you, you observe Shabbat and you're already going to put your Shabbat candles in a central place. Maybe you're going to maybe you're just going to like declutter a section of the room to just feel more calm. Again, it could be Shabbat related, or it could just be weekend related, of slowing down the week. Some of us don't work full time. Some of us are retired. We don't always have a transition from weekday into the weekend. And as we move into Shabbat, I want us to take a inspiration from Abram and hopefully Sarai, and what's one little thing, and you can type it into the chat if you want as like a way of committing to it. What's one little thing you could shift to dedicate space? So for example, I have these purple glasses that are very expensive. They're antiques. I keep them in a drawer, and I only bring them out on Shabbat. So I'm going to take those out of the drawer and dust them off, and I'm going to use them when my friend comes over tomorrow for lunch. Again, it doesn't have to be Shabbat related. It can just be a transition into the weekend. What's something else you can do to dedicate in the space? And I really appreciate, we have someone sharing that Gail says, my husband died suddenly. My home is already significantly altered. I'm holding on to sameness as best I can. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. One little area, maybe you didn't design the end of your coffee table to be an altar, but it's been sitting that exact way for so long. You want to leave it as is because you already dedicated it as an altar. It reminds you of someone. It reminds you of when someone was there. And that actually sameness is what makes you feel grounded. Sending you lots of love, Gail. Thank you, everyone, for sharing in the chat how they might do a modern, non-animal sacrifice altar space in their home, dedicating a new space, or maybe rededicating an existing altar. Wishing you all Shabbat Shalom, and I'll pass the mic to Julie to close us out.